It's a pandemic product sourced around the globe, often from China and at great expense. But now that N95 mask, well, it could be produced right here in Windsor. Plus,
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound.
music, prayer, and fond memories of a life lived. Mourners fill an auditorium in Minneapolis to celebrate the life of George Floyd. Gusty on the riverfront today, foggy overnight, but not much to complain about right now in Windsor when you look at the weather. 29 degrees outside. Colette Kennedy has all the details in her forecast. I'm Chris Ensing, thanks for joining us. A Windsor company says that it's doing something that no one else in the country is able to do. It's set to produce N95 masks. Harbor Technologies usually works in the automotive and nuclear sectors, but they've spent the pandemic getting its production facility ready to make the much-needed medical equipment. Jacob Barker was at that facility, and he's got something in his hand right there. What are we looking at, Jacob?
Yeah, well, Chris, if you could see on this mask that we use at the CBC, you can see right there, it's printed N95 and it's certified by NIOSH. And that means that it is a certified N95 mask, and it's something that a Canadian company has not been able to achieve. But Harbor Technologies says it will get that certification, and it is building the machines right now to get these masks into production. I swung by to take a look.
It's designed primarily for frontline workers. When we started the project, that was our main focus. N95 masks are imported into Canada from the US and overseas from China primarily. Our machines will be for manufacturing N95s in Canada for Canadian sales. A lot of other manufacturers are coming in with Chinese-made machinery, Chinese-made engineered mask designs that are just suited for general public, and barely that. It's past the engineering phase. The designs have been approved. It's now in the machining phase and fabrication phase.
It's a different market, definitely. We're used to working in the automotive and nuclear market, but the skill set's still the same.
We basically created our own chain of supply that was readily available and not relying on the typical markets like China. We found different markets from the US, another overseas manufacturer, and basically engineered the mask around those types of materials. Some of them have very unique properties in them that aren't available in Canada, and in some cases in North America. That makes it pretty unique. A lot of the components on the mask, our customer has really pushed hard to incorporate Canadian content, such as the nose piece being Canadian made, the elastic bands Canadian made. So there's definitely not just the engineering and equipment Canadian content, but there's also Canadian content on the mask itself.
We're rocking and rolling right now, so we're hoping to have most of the equipment done by the end of the month, and then starting to run into the runoff beginning of July. So we're running full steam at it and giving it everything we have. So.
Yeah, and we did get a chance to ask David Mouget, the CEO of Windsor Regional, about the fact that a local company could be producing these masks, and he said it was excellent news as long as they could get the certification. And that's because you might remember a few weeks ago we told you a story about the lengths that Windsor Regional Hospital went to get 500,000 of these masks in China in what they called a Wild West deal. But the company says, Harbor Technology says, that it's confident it will be able to get that certification and that they should be in production by July. Chris?
Thanks for that, Jacob. And you can read more about that story about trying to get those masks on cbc.ca/Windsor. Now, this was a day of mourning in the United States. The first of several memorials were held in honor of George Floyd. Family, civil rights leaders, and even Hollywood stars on hand to pay tribute to a man whose horrific death has galvanized a worldwide movement for equality. Perhaps the most powerful message of the day, delivered by one of America's best-known civil rights leaders. Susan Ormiston has the details from Minneapolis.
It's time for us to stand up in Georgia's name and say, get your knee off our necks.
It was as much a civil rights revival here at a university in Minneapolis as Reverend Al Sharpton, the civil rights activist, thundered a message to the crowd here to honor George Floyd, who died in Minneapolis just over a week ago. Sharpton invoked the idea of a white police officer's knee on a black man's neck as echoes down in history, and said this is a rare moment in American history to reform the criminal justice system and make a better country for all its citizens. The family's lawyer, Ben Crump, said that what happened that day was tantamount to torture, and the 3 officers who are implicated in his death appeared at the same time in a Minneapolis court. The judge set bail at $750,000 for each of them. They face charges of aiding and abetting murder. A 4th officer is charged with 2nd-degree murder. There was lots of singing and praising the Lord, and really a celebration of Floyd's life, but also a recognition, says Sharpton, that this death has changed things. He said he has hope for the future, given the breadth of the response, the blacks and whites marching in the last week, all ages, and he invoked people not to let this opportunity pass. Floyd's casket, which was here, will go to Houston over the weekend, where a formal funeral is planned for Tuesday. Susan Ormiston, CBC News, Minneapolis.
Now, there have been and continue to be protests in our region calling for justice for George Floyd. Many want to show solidarity with rallies across the border and draw attention to racism here in Canada. But health officials have also raised concerns about the safety of these gatherings during a pandemic. Windsor's Medical Officer of Health, Dr. Wajid Ahmed, spoke about his concerns this morning.
My heart goes out for this tragic incident, and as much as I condemn that act, but also in terms of people who are congregating, I think they need to be careful what kind of risk that they may put themselves in if they are not appropriately following the public health measures, even from their role as the community citizen. We all have a role to play in preventing and limiting the spread of COVID-19. So as much as you want to show your solidarity, your concern, do it in a safe way without putting yourself or anyone else at risk.
Dr. Ahmed got a shout out from the Premier today. During his daily news conference, Doug Ford said that Ahmed deserved praise for the random testing happening across Windsor, Essex in the recent days.
I want to give a shout out to Windsor. I want to give a shout out to the Essex Medical Officer of Health, Dr. Ahmed. I want to say thank you for the great work you're doing. They worked with police, city staff, parks, and recreation to organize road closures, rerouting cars to allow drive-through testing on the side of the road. And they did 1,800 tests in over 3 days, and that's fantastic.
Now, Doug Ford has come under fire this week for flip-flopping on whether systemic racism exists in Canada and Ontario. Today, the government announced a youth council that will focus on equality. That's drawing fire from the opposition. Lisa Shing looks at the government's record on anti-racism.
As mourners attend a memorial for George Floyd, an acknowledgement from the Ford government.
This pain has not gone unnoticed.
Their response, a new council focusing on education, skills training, and employment for youth.
We were all dealing with a pandemic, which brings its health issues. Then you add on the economic issues on top of that. You add on the fact that we have constraints, rightfully so, on how our communities can gather and support one another. And then you add, then the fourth layer on top of all of that has been this weight of racism.
But Liberal MPP Michael Coteau points out.
The Premier's Youth Opportunities Advisory Council existed 2 years ago, and Doug Ford got rid of that. So it's just a bit disappointing. Thanks, Andrew.
Coteau was also the previous government's minister in charge of anti-racism. That position was eliminated when the PCs took power.
They don't think it's important enough to have its own portfolio.
After a week where the Premier backtracked on whether there's systemic racism in Canada, critics say his government's track record falls flat.
They have not really lived up to its promise and has not given anti-racism the priority that it's due.
Avi Go helped shape the previous government's legislation on anti-racism that passed in 2017. She points to several decisions the PCs have made.
The Anti-Racism Directorate was established 4 years ago to help eliminate racism from government policymaking, decisions, and programs. Now, when the Ford government came into power, it eliminated 4 subcommittees associated with that directorate.
We're continuing to support the Anti-Racism Directorate, and at the same time, we're continuing to build on our Black Youth Action Plan.
Go says if the government were truly committed, it would start by mandating all ministries and departments collect race-based data to better inform policymaking. Lisa Shing, CBC News, Toronto.
Many retail stores have been able to open for the past 2 weeks, but there's still businesses in Ontario waiting for the go-ahead. And some will have greater challenges than others in keeping things clean and keeping people apart. But as CBC Windsor's Dale Molnar reports, they're optimistic that they can make their establishments safe.
This is what the Shred Shop Wellness Center workout room looked like before they had to shut down due to the pandemic. They rented out equipment to clients to work out at home during the shutdown. The owner says since people work out with individual equipment like dumbbells and barbells, they can isolate people well, and they will be sanitizing a lot.
Stop, drop, and sanitize stations right when you enter the facility. All the way through, every 20 feet, there'll be an opportunity to sanitize or wipe things down. We'll be running extra classes, and we've hired on extra bodies as employees to, be able to do all of the cleaning that is mandated.
Here at the Super Bowl Lanes Bowling Alley in East Windsor, the owners are hiring a local company called Go Fog It to do some specialized sanitizing. They use a handheld sprayer to disinfect entire buildings.
What it is, it's a fog-based treatment that will clean up to, I believe, from the company, it's 99% of all impurities in the air and all viruses and anything. Helps keep our bowling alley as clean as possible and as safe as possible.
Clarkson says they will fog every 2 weeks and sanitize areas and bowling balls after every bowler. He says they may also put up dividers in the lanes and possibly space people out every other lane. The old Walkerville Theatre is still finalizing plans. They can move seating around on the main floor, but if they can only fit fewer than 200 people in the theater, it means they will have to rethink what entertainment they'll be able to offer.
Our break-even point for a concert is between 200 to 300 people. So without only having about 100 people or even less than that, if it's 6 feet apart, because our venue is not very large, then the type of entertainment we'd have to bring in would be very small, which wouldn't be the same caliber of entertainment that we've been bringing in previously.
All the precautions the businesses will be taking will cut into their bottom lines big time, but they're optimistic they will survive. Dale Molnar, CBC News, Windsor.
The province's police watchdog has ruled that there's no evidence that officers used excessive force during an arrest last year, an arrest that left a man with broken ribs. Now, according to the Special Investigations Unit, officers were looking for a 27-year-old man that they believed was carrying a firearm. The report also says police had information the man had rammed police vehicles while fleeing from officers in the past. Eventually, they tried to arrest him at a gas station in Tecumseh. A struggle ensued. The man was later charged with dangerous driving and drug-related offenses. He was also sent to the hospital, where he was diagnosed with fractured ribs. The man said he was assaulted during his arrest and in the patrol wagon, according to the SIU report. The SIU director says that he accepts the evidence that the man was punched multiple times by officers, including twice in the head. But he goes on to say this: these strikes fell within the range of what was reasonably necessary to overcome the complainant's strenuous resistance on the ground, especially since police were fearful that the man had a gun. He also determined that there are no reasonable grounds to believe that any officer committed a criminal offense in connection with the man's arrest and injuries. There's another campaign that's been launched to support a new hospital in Windsor, Essex, and it's being led by the Windsor Essex Economic Development Corporation.
I say formalize it. Like I said, 42 Forward has done a terrific job. They rallied, they lobbied, they got press, they demonstrated that there was support for the project. But there wasn't a campaign, a letter writing campaign, or an email campaign, or there was, and again, I'm not saying that there would. These things cost money. These things take time.
We can't wait is the campaign slogan. People can sign up to show support and upload sites online. Mackenzie expects it will cost in the low six figures, but wouldn't give an exact number. He says it's to show the province that there is support for a new hospital, a project that's taken years for approvals and still needs the provincial government to release money for the next step. The decision on the site of the new hospital is in a lengthy appeals process ahead of the local planning appeal tribunal. The group saying that it's not a good economic location out by the airport. That's the group that filed the appeal. Mackenzie says that the construction alone is good economics and part of why they've started this campaign. And once he said that it should be something that he had started 2 or 3 years ago.
It's not a secret that when the province came out with their capital budget long-term plan, our project had been bumped out of the next 5-year window. And we've been leapfrogged by a number of other hospital projects like this. And that's the wrong direction. We have to put this back in the right direction.
Another live look outside here as we prepare for what hopefully will be another one of those beautiful sunsets. Certainly had one of them last night. Colette Kennedy has all the details in her forecast coming up. But before we go to break, we want to show you something from Minneapolis. It was a day of mourning, but a moment on the streets last night really stands out, captured by one of our Radio Canada colleagues, a local artist playing piano. Have a listen. Joining us now for a live look at the weather is Colette Kennedy. Colette, the orange peel behind you kind of dominates what we're talking about today about the weather, eh?
Yeah, exactly, right? You know, sometimes you don't even need to look at the numbers, just look at the colors, right? The contours there. Lots of the oranges that are pushing in. 29, not exactly how it feels because we got to factor in that humidity. Look at Toronto, actually 30, warmer than us at 29. The hot spot was Buttonville Airport, not just for Ontario. 30.7 degrees is actually for all of Canada. Kind of interesting there. And what we're really seeing, if we look at the current temperatures, still holding in a lot of that heat, factor in the humidity, mid-30s. Tomorrow, you know, I think that humidex is going to be up there about 38, maybe even approaching 40. So it is going to be a stickier afternoon, a little bit harder on some of you, a little younger, older, pregnant, that kind of thing. You do have to really take it easier if you have any underlying conditions there with that heat, and make sure you take some breaks and get out of the sun and have lots of water as well. You know the drill, but just got to remind you a little bit. Having a look at how things are going into these evening hours. Quiet now. See how there's a few little cells there kind of bubbling up, some light sprinkles as some of this heat approaches the lake. But for the most part, we'll see just isolated showers, if anything, kind of showing up in the evening hours. And then after that, we may get into a little bit of patchy fog as we go towards the morning. That will burn off, though, and the start of the day on Friday is actually looking really good. But there's going to be a cold front, so a leading edge of a new air mass that's going to be moving in as we get a little later in the day. Still midday, doing okay, and then here that comes. It breaks up quite a bit as it heads over Lake Huron, but still I am anticipating some rain, some embedded thunderstorms rolling through here into those evening hours. And then that moves on and sets us up very nicely, not only for Saturday, but into Sunday. And it's interesting because this new air mass moves in, cools temperatures down a little bit, not for very long at all, and then the heat's coming right back in. So a little look at what those temperatures are like overnight tonight. Still looking at some high teens for those overnight readings. Tomorrow, 30, 31, as I said, kind of feeling closer to 40. And then we get into some of that active weather a little later in the day. So when you're making your plans, it should hold off there till we get towards about 4 o'clock or onwards. But Sunday, cooler at 23, and then we're just going to do it all over again, Chris, and bring those oranges and reds back onto our maps.
It's not a bad deal. Thanks, Colette.
You're welcome.
Now, it seems like we have perfect weather for bird watching, but someone in Perth, Ontario has flipped the script a little bit. They're watching something else from their front porch. We'll have that story next. Standing outside your house, watching traffic go by might sound like the most boring way to pass time during this pandemic, but a man in Perth, Ontario has turned it into an amateur game with some pretty big prizes. The final episode last weekend, and the big prize, a new car. CBC's Jennifer Chevalier has the story.
We have car. We have truck. Car.
For the last 10 weeks, Ryan Murphy has stood outside his house playing car, truck.
So in the simplest terms, the way the game worked was I would come out here and I'd have my phone and everyone watching live, and then I'd simply turn to the road and videotape the next 3 vehicles that came by.
So my favorite part of this game?
At its peak, 600 people were tuning in to place their guesses on which order the vehicles would drive past his house.
When I went to work, we'd all like compare what we guessed and like what numbers we picked. And it's just funny because it started off so small, and then people not from just Perth were tuning in, watching it.
Every single penny of that goes to help people that are struggling a bit, trying to feed their families. So
Murphy started the show in March to give people something to do during lockdown. He added musical guests and more games, including a chicken race. But it grew into an opportunity to help the local economy by giving away prizes that benefited businesses in Lanark County.
all these small businesses are the ones that we constantly go to raise money for sports, to raise money for our schools, to raise money for everything that our youth really do around here, and they always respond. So it was a chance for us to give back to them.
Eventually, Murphy contacted the local Ford dealership and asked if they would donate a car to give away as the final prize.
I had got up that morning and texted a friend. I said, I'm feeling lucky today. I think I'll wash my hair.
My phone rang. I stopped the car. Susan said, you won. And I said, I won what? And she said it was the car, which was just kind of unbelievable.
Yeah.
Your brand new 2020 Escape.
Wow. That is so nice.
It was just a good cause, and we really, really, really appreciated everything that Ryan was doing. So it was just something we were happy to be a part of.
Ryan Murphy's Car Truck Show has put $15,000 back into the local economy. Most of the prizes were gift certificates donated by members of the public to spend in local stores. As a thank you for this work, the Ford dealership gave Murphy his own car. Jennifer Chevalier, CBC News, Perth.
It's 6:29 p.m. That's it for CBC Windsor News. We do not have prizes, but we have a tower cam. Let's take that shot and see if we can't have a little bit of fun ourselves. We just need the traffic to play along here. And right now, it looks like it's not helping out. That is such a fun game. I remember back in the day driving in my car. Oh, wait, we have one. I believe that's car. We need another car. Oh, traffic's not playing along with us. All right, well, we tried. Thanks for watching. Any updates on any of these stories, go to cbc.ca/Windsor and try and find a little bit of that fun in your life during times that are difficult for everyone. Thanks for watching. Stay safe.